FOMO.
My name is Patrick J. McGinnis, and I'm a FOMO Sapiens. And since you're here, I'm going to bet that you are too. And when you're like us and Monday comes around, you don't dread the new week. No, you wake up every Monday morning knowing that this week might just be the best one yet. This is FOMOnday, the snackable show that starts your week right with hot takes, life hacks, listener mail, and even some FOMO therapy. All right, everybody, this is FOMOnday, the snackable companion show to FOMO Sapiens, which of course drops a full episode every Thursday. But until then, happy FOMOnday. I'm your host, Patrick J. McGinnis, venture capitalist by day, author and podcaster by night, and of course, FOMO Sapiens 24/7. Now, coming up on Thursday, we have Walter Masterson, who is a TikTok influencer, and his story is insane. But since we're going to be talking about TikTok, it is natural to start thinking about the people who live on TikTok. And a lot of those people are in Gen Z. Now, Gen Z currently constitutes nearly a quarter of the population, and it is the most racially and ethnically diverse generation in our nation's history in America, but all over the world. And I have somebody who is looking very carefully at Gen Z and trying to figure out the decisions that Gen Z is making, in particular with healthcare. So my guest today is Lisa Blau, the founding partner of Able Partners. Lisa, welcome to FOMOndays.
Thanks for having me, Patrick. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to talk about Gen Z and their healthcare needs.
So let's start before we even get into that. Tell me about Able Partners, and then tell me about why you decided to do this study.
Sure. So Able Partners is an early stage consumer venture fund focused exclusively on investing in health and wellness. We like to invest in positive living. So that's the brands that are helping the consumer live a healthier, happier, more meaningful life. And we're particularly interested in closing what we refer to as the wellness gap. So that's the gap that exists when we see rising economic indicators, but decreasing measures of health and well-being, both physical and mental. So at our fund, we spend a lot of time looking at the innovators, entrepreneurs, and businesses that are helping to close that gap. It's historically where the consumer has been stigmatized, overlooked, or underserved by businesses or by our systems of care. And so that's where we've spent a ton of time, particularly in disruptive healthcare. And, our team at Able Partners partnered up with another fund that we collaborate with a lot, Springbank Collective. And, we were just talking about what the world would look like in 5 to 10 years. And it's really impossible to have that conversation without, recognizing the impact that Gen Z will have on the healthcare system in the next decade. As you said a little bit at the top, right? Gen Z, they were born between 1997 and 2012. And at this point in time, the adult Gen Zers, they're leaving home, they're graduating from school and they're starting their first jobs. And as a result, they are navigating the healthcare system on their own for the very first time. By 2030, they're going to make up 30% of the workforce. Their earnings will reach $2 trillion. There are a number of assumptions out there about Gen Z's preferences, but we really wanted to take a quantitative and qualitative approach to understand more about their healthcare needs and expectations.
I'm really curious as I think about Gen Z. So everybody talks about Gen Z like the way they talked about millennials, but few people sit down and really think about what is this generation all about? So if we step back at the 10,000 foot level, and look at the foundings in your study, I was really interested because it's it is a very different group of people than even the millennials. What are some of the kind of big characteristics that you see in Gen Z?
They're the most diverse, right? Half of Gen Z is racially diverse or an ethnic minority. More than 20% identify as LGBTQIA, and 22% have at least one immigrant parent. At the same time, they're feeling burned out. 46%, feel burnout due to the demands of their working environments. And, they're also a very, social media savvy, engaged generation. That's how they grew up. And, more than half of Gen Z is on TikTok, accounting for about, I think, 60% of TikTok's base. But within this study, we really wanted to understand and kind of debunk some of the assumptions about this generation as they start to approach their healthcare. So, one of the most surprising findings for us as we think of this generation kind of stereotypically as being tech addicted was that they prefer convenient in-person healthcare as the majority, said they want in-person office visits, right? 62% said that an in-person visit was their preferred way to communicate with a healthcare provider. And 50% said convenient location was their number one criteria. So, this was, to be honest, even though we're healthcare investors, it was surprising to us. And I think when we double click on that to really better understand, their preferences, we really know that this generation is not about one or the other. There's nuance to their preferences, and they really want to blend the offline experiences and the online, tech-enabled touch points that gives them, flexibility and immediate response and easy interface to schedule and communicate. And we have a few hypotheses about what this kind of ties back to a couple of themes, right? I think they have a desire for authentic connection, and they also at the same time have a unique definition of health. Authentic connection, right? They've been referred to as the loneliest generation. And I think this was magnified by the pandemic and by, the generation's really like inability to make meaningful connections in really critical years of their lives. And as it relates to their unique definition of health, you and I probably thought of health as, annual checkup, you're going to visit your doctor and you're getting things, taken care of. But for Gen Z, they're really viewing their health on a continuum. It's about everyday behavioral changes to continuously better their physical and mental well-being. Better sleep, more exercise, stress management, all these things, are really important to them. And I think it's because they see health as their most important continuous investment. And I think that's why they really want to make authentic connection with their healthcare providers.
FOMO. One of the things that I thought was really interesting about the study that didn't surprise me, but I was, it sort of confirmed some of the things that I've been thinking about is that Generation Z is really focused on mental health as part of their health identity. And so especially expecting, employers to be there with solutions when it comes to mental health. So talk about some of those findings, because on FOMO Sapiens, a lot of times we've been, we spent a lot of time in the last couple of years talking about that nexus between productivity, mental health, and business. So what did you find?
Yeah, really unbelievable, right? Mental health care benefits are the number one request from employers behind the 401k. So, once again, you and I are Gen X, and my expectation when I was coming out of college was not that my employer was going to pay for my mental health, care. So this generation, they expect it, they're demanding it. And I think, in a fragmented healthcare system, employers have really been taking on a larger role, in providing healthcare for their employees. I think 50% of Americans get healthcare through their employers. And as investors, we've seen a big spike in investment in health tech companies that are building for the employer channel. Gen Z is going to have an enormous impact here with the norms and the culture and the workplace. And I think we see that with them really advocating and communicating to their employer that healthcare is mental health care. They're also, there's a generational change in terms of their comfort with talking about mental health, both online and offline. 68% of our respondents said they're very or somewhat comfortable talking about mental health. So on the one hand, that suggests a really steep decline in stigma, but I think it also aligns, with our other findings about the rise in stress and depression for a generation, that's really faced a few challenging years. I think 42% said they're working with a therapist either sometimes or daily. Relative to older generations, this generation is significantly more likely to seek mental health therapy or counseling. And we think it's a great thing, right? The stigma has been reduced. They self-advocate. They're comfortable talking about it. Unfortunately, the mental health distress that they're experiencing as a generation, is unprecedented. But hopefully, they're going to advocate to get the tools and services that they need. And actually, social media has become, a real place for them to receive support and feel less alone.
It's interesting. I was reading over the weekend an article precisely about this, that the stigma is not there in the way that it was. And you think about, a singer like Shawn Mendes or a Naomi Osaka that are taking a step away from their work for their own mental health. So this is a positive development that we're going to see, I think, more and more conversation around this. Now, Lisa, I want to do a little favor here because your job is to invest in great companies. We know what your investment thesis is, and listeners to this show are entrepreneurs and builders that may just show up at your office one day with a great business plan. So what can entrepreneurs do to meet the needs of Gen Z, especially when it comes to healthcare? And, what are you seeing in your own sort of pipeline that are companies that excite you in this space, or maybe companies you've invested in?
I think the employer channel is really an important channel. It's where we're seeing a lot of some of the best businesses and innovators, creating and building solutions. We're investors in Spring Health, which is a phenomenal business that sells into the employer channel that's helping, the employer match their employee to the absolute best care possible. We're also excited about finding ways to use, community, whether that be through social media or otherwise, to reach Gen Z, where they are, meet them where they are and where they're comfortable. We're also invested in a business that's actually like supporting the content creators in the mental health space that are really speaking to this population and looking for support. We've invested in a lot of businesses that actually support the therapists and make their work, more efficient and more effective. We need more therapists in this country. And the therapists that we do have, there's a lot of like roadblocks and opportunity to unlock hours and times and resources for them. So we're, invested in businesses like Alma Health that have been able to do that. And I think that founders need to understand, this generation, treat them like the unique set of young adults that they are, relative to previous generations. Embrace, their willingness to talk about mental health, to advocate, to make time, prioritize, spend out of pocket on it. But also, as we said at the top of the conversation, this is, one of the very most diverse generations. And they also need to find therapists that look and feel and sound like them. And so, I think creating a more diverse workforce within the category is also important. And so founders who are thinking about that, it will serve them well. We're also even going a little bit younger and starting to think about that younger Gen Z population that isn't in the employer channel yet. How do you reach them? Obviously, schools are a great channel to reach that population. The earlier you can get support and intervene, the better the long-term outcomes. So that's something we've been thinking a lot about as well.
All right, everybody. So I want you to go to genzhealth.com, read up on what we've been talking about here so you can start a business to pitch to Lisa. You can find her website at ablepartners.nyc. Lisa Blau, founding partner in Able Partners. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Patrick. It was great being here.
FOMO. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis, on Twitter at PJ McGinnis, and on the web at FOMOsapiens.com or PatrickMcGinnis.com, where you can get all kinds of free resources to live a more decisive and entrepreneurial life. FOMO. Want more FOMO Sapiens and FOMOnday? Head over to FOMOsapiens.com, where you can listen to past episodes, learn more about the show, and find out how to advertise. You can also connect with me on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis and on Twitter at PJ McGinnis.